Is Ivana Q if you're new here. And if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Monday, July the 25th. And today we're talking about something that we actually reported on late last week. Today I am joined by our reporter, Sarah Whites-Koditschek. And Sarah reported, I believe on Thursday, a story about several people who are being asked to pay back thousands of dollars to the state of Alabama from what the state is saying was a unemployment check and unemployment benefits that were overpaid. Now, Sarah included, again, several specific examples of people facing this type of problem, but there are hundreds more people in this situation. Sarah's here today to explain this a little bit and talk about what can be done about the situation. Now, Sarah, we should say before we go any further as well that on Friday, so a day after you released the story, that Governor Kay Ivey did release a statement saying that this was a, quote, concerning situation and an outrageous backlog. It also said that her team, or her team said, I should say, that she was not aware of the state asking people to pay back, again, these thousands of dollars in unemployment benefits.
Right. Yeah. As many people, I'm sure, remember, the federal government spent hundreds of billions of dollars during the pandemic helping states give people unemployment, and something like a quarter of Americans were on unemployment during the pandemic. That's what the $600 weekly payments were. And those programs were responding to an emergency. They were set up fairly quickly, and departments like in Alabama, they didn't, they were short-staffed. They didn't have a chance to prepare or staff up. So when they paid out all this money, particularly the federal money, there were little glitchy issues that happened, and then the department really was unable to address any of them. So people probably remember the delays that people face trying to get money in the first place. So now some of the relatively small number of people who actually did get that unemployment money, quite a number of them are getting letters saying that they actually owe tens of thousands of dollars back, and they're just shocked because they did not see this coming. And the letter doesn't explain why. It just says, you were overpaid. You owe us $10,000. I actually was speaking with a woman on the phone who thought she owed $1,200, and she looked at her account and she was like, it says $20,000. Like, she's just like stunned.
Well, and I think it's worth, again, repeating. I've got some of the data in front of me that you included in your story. And Alabama's reported paying over $164 million in unemployment from 2020 and 2021. And that's data from the U.S. Department of Labor. So again, Alabama's reported overpaying $164 million in unemployment. Now the department is coming back to a lot of these people who received these payments, who likely did not know at the time when they got those unemployment checks that they were technically overpaid. Now the department is coming back and saying, look, you owe us X amount of dollars in this basically payments to pay us back for what we gave you was too much. Now, I think the question here, Sarah, that a lot of people have is this the state asking people to pay for their mistakes?
Yeah, $164 million is a lot of money. That is, I think, about 20% of the total they paid out in the pandemic. So we don't know how much of that they're asking for from people back, but I guess, it's a lot. As to whose mistakes, it's totally not clear. They could have been, in other states, this has happened. And in other states, sometimes it's been the mistake in the department. Sometimes people will check like the wrong box. They'll hit the wrong button on the form or something. It gets submitted, and that's counted as a mistake that could be disqualifying. The advocates who they're involved in a lawsuit against the department in Alabama, they're saying that the department gave inconsistent about when they counted the dates of like when you qualified based on when you lost your job. I believe that there are issues like that where it's just discrepancies in determining qualification, and I so it's just like totally, when the letters come out, they don't say what the issue is, and because people aren't able to get their appeals heard, they aren't often able to figure out what the issue is. Now, sometimes people have gotten through to get their appeals heard, but so there's data from last year showing that Alabama was on average like 2 years behind in hearing appeals, and some other states were hearing appeals in 15 days or 20 days. And the second worst state in this area was Georgia. They still had twice as fast a rate, or they were half as far behind in hearing appeals. So that's a big part of the reason why, like in Alabama, I don't think it's totally clear like what the issues typically are, but they could be an issue with the the agency. It's just nobody really knows until they go through the appeal.
Well, and then it's almost like that never ending circle, right? So say that you get a letter saying you owe $15,000 because we overpaid you in unemployment. You say, oh my gosh, no way. I don't know what to do. You call to try to set up an appeal process. You can't get an appeal process again for maybe more than 2 years. Then you find out that the state is saying, well, maybe we can take some of your tax return. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yes. So Legal Services Alabama, in their lawsuit, they say that the state sent out letters to all these people threatening wage garnishment, saying they're going to take their tax returns if they don't pay in 30 days or whatever. There was some amount of time they had, and they say legally the state isn't allowed to take your tax return until you've gone through the appeals process. And so the legal services attorney was saying, we asked them like, well, if you're not going to actually take their tax returns, have you let them know that you're not going to take their tax returns? And the department said, no, we didn't let people know that we're not actually going to take their tax returns. We just let them know that we are. So I asked the department, like, did this happen? And they declined to comment because of the lawsuit, but they did say it. They did say, and this is before the governor spoke out, but they did say, now we are starting to take people's tax returns. Now we're starting the process of referring these cases to be able to take people's tax returns.
Sarah, and this is not a knock on you. That makes no sense. You say, no, we're going to take your tax returns. Then you come back and say, no, we're not really going to take it, but we haven't told them we're not going to take it. Then step 3, no, now actually we are going to take it. And again, that is coming from people who filed for unemployment, obviously because they needed, or presumably we can say because they needed unemployment between 2020 and 2021. So they likely don't have the money to just withdraw $15,000 from their checking account or their savings account and pay this payment the state is demanding. So again, we're just putting ourselves in that shoes. You say, look, I'm going to appeal this. You can't get an appeal. And then at that point, if you can't get an appeal, then you are risking your tax return being garnished. You're risking your wages being garnished. And then you just are essentially put in this cycle of there's really no way out for something that you might have not done anything wrong in filling out your paperwork. You might have not been the cause of this overpayment. Is that right?
Yeah. And if you read this story, there's some anecdotes of people who did actually get through. And they're like, I just called. And then a woman was like, I got an appointment finally. And then they canceled it. And then they just called me and they're like, oh, you don't owe us money. Actually, we're going to give you more of your unemployment money. So it does anecdotally, it seems like there's like this inconsistency. So yeah, like I think what you described is kind of what people are experiencing and maybe why the governor reacted the way she did. And I will say other states have had this issue of the overpayments, similar reasons. In Michigan, the state instructed people, I can't remember if it was net or gross income, but they instructed them, you want to give us one or the other. And then they disqualified all those people who followed the instructions, and they were like, it was actually the wrong instruction. So the error was one from like people put the wrong kind of income, but it was because of the state told them to do that. So then they went back and so there's a way to forgive this. The federal government last year identified this problem because it's happening in so many places and created these waivers, and states can apply to just waive the overpayments. They can apply for different groups of people, but they can just say, it was a pandemic. Anybody who got an overpayment for any reason or for these reasons, we're just going to forgive it. They just need to like go through some kind of process with that. And Alabama has not done that. And when I asked, they said they are not doing that. And that is when the governor on Friday said she wants them to seek solutions. And then I asked them about that. They said, well, we're going to look into expanding the waivers, which would mean potentially doing something like that. But previously, the state was not.
Previously, the state was not doing what other states were doing and basically offering forgiveness for these problems that it seems like nobody understands whose fault it was, right? Now, something that's also is interesting in your story, you have that over 12,000 appeals have still not been heard in the state of Alabama. That is a lot of appeals. It's a lot of people who are still waiting to have their case heard. And again, that's probably not including some of the people that you talked to who just kind of got a lucky break and happened to be the one that got through on the phone, or the one that was able to speak with somebody from the Department of Labor and get this situation taken care of.
Yeah, that was actually from like the spring, so the number could be different now, but they didn't give an updated number because they said it was, a part of the lawsuit. But yeah, we actually don't have really clear information on that. But yeah, a lot of people.
Well, and also too, I think it's really interesting is your reporting came out, I believe, on Thursday. And then on Friday, again, the governor's office came out and said, look, this is a problem. We acknowledge this is a problem. And again, the governor's office said that they had not been consulted on this problem, that they had not been essentially looped into what was going on there. So again, you said the governor's office said they are, I think their exact quote was that they were looking for solutions. So is it possible that this overarching blanket of forgiveness that other states are doing could happen here in Alabama?
Yeah. I mean, Alabama could do that. They could ask for this waiver and forgive these problems.
Well, you mentioned again several anecdotes of people and their specific circumstances in your story, but there was one that I thought was especially interesting. Everybody was obviously very upset about getting these letters. You mentioned earlier you were actually on the phone with a woman who thought she owed about $1,200, and then as you were on the phone with her, she realized when she logged into her online dashboard, she owed like $20,000, and she was just absolutely stunned. But you mentioned somebody, and I believe he was an Uber driver in your story, who said, yes, I'm getting this letter. I'm being asked to pay back X amount of money, but I'm not going to pay it until my appeal is heard. I think a lot of people probably have that same sentiment. Look, I'm not going to pay this. I don't think I did anything wrong. I'm not going to pay till at least this goes through and I have a fair shot to refute this. But if you go that route, like this Uber driver is saying, now, again, with that uncertainty of if your tax return could be taken, if your wages would be garnished, are people seeking out their own counsel? Are people trying to file their own lawsuits against the state? What is the course here of action?
Yes. Yeah. The Erica Martin, another woman in the story, she's like a single mom of 3, and she was in that situation where she was worried about her taxes being garnished or taken and her wages garnished. And she just said, I'd rather pay than not know if they're going to garnish my wages, because that was so stressful to her and she's already struggling. And she said, if she pays, then it's on her terms. And if they garnish her wages, they're going to take what they take. I will say the legal services attorney said these situations occurred in the past before the pandemic. It's just the volume of money and the speed that it was set up led to a lot more issues with, it's just the volume and the circumstances. But so there's precedent for this happening before, where people were overpaid and then their wages were ultimately garnished. But it did take some time. So it's not really clear how long, since the department is so backlogged, like how long it would actually take them to do what they're threatening to do. But with the tax returns, maybe that would be sooner to come. But yeah, I guess it seems like a lot of people are pretty stressed about the threat of this hanging over them, and so yeah, I did hear both reactions. Like, I talked to one guy who's disabled and he can't pay, and he said he doesn't have anything for them to take, and he doesn't have anything to give them, so he's not going to be able to pay. Yeah, and I should just say the department said that they have done some waivers. They can do waivers on a case-by-case basis, that the person has to go through the appeal. They have to figure out if they actually do legitimately have an overpayment. So it's kind of like you get this letter saying you have an overpayment, but nobody has actually confirmed that you do. It's just like you're kind of like, you're in that guilty with overpayment category until proven innocent, and then you have to have the appeal. But if you can't get an appeal, you can't prove yourself innocent. But I don't know if that's fair terminology, but once you go through the appeal and you you show that you actually don't have an overpayment, it's just gone. You don't, and then you might be able to access your benefits again. If it's shown you legitimately were overpaid based on the criteria, then you could try to get a waiver. And Alabama's given like $1 million in waivers in the pandemic, they said. So that's out of some whatever portion of $164 million they're trying to collect back.
I'm looking through a couple of comments here I want to address. One's from Shay, said this may have happened because getting the money out to help people was so rushed. And you actually addressed that in your story, Sarah. And sounds like Shay's right. That is essentially what you found, that a lot of these overpayments, at least in other states, happened because these systems were set up so quickly at the onset of the pandemic and the onset of so many people losing their jobs and needing these benefits, and that these departments were not prepared to have this workload. So that, at least in other states, seemed to be a cause of some of these overpayments. But from what you have reported, Alabama has not released any data for us to understand what exactly the problem is and why so many overpayments were issued. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And so, as to like this problem occurring because of the rush, some advocates I spoke with, they made the point that the whole purpose of unemployment is to be able to quickly help people in the time that they're unemployed to prevent an economic crisis in their lives, so a financial crisis. So if unemployment takes 2 years to get, it's not really serving its purpose too well. And yeah, a lot of states were overwhelmed. And I think what sets Alabama apart is the way that it's continued to be so far behind other states in addressing these issues.
And I want to clear up as well. I got a question here about if you don't file for an appeal. So say you got a letter and says that you are somebody that they believe was overpaid. If you do not go through that appeals process, can your wages still be garnished? Can the state still come after you if you don't start that appeal process? If you just essentially don't do anything, what happens then?
If you don't do anything, then you basically give up your option to appeal, and then they carry through with the overpayment process. So,
and also, go ahead.
No, that's it.
And then again, we should note that this is not solely an Alabama problem. This is a problem that has happened across the country. It's just Alabama has dealt with it in a little bit different of a way, I think it's fair to say, than other states, especially those you mentioned in the story who have offered those blanket forgiveness from money from the federal government. Now, again, looking through some more of these questions, this is an ongoing situation, Sarah. Again, the governor just released that statement on Friday after your reporting saying that they're looking into the options. Do we know when the governor will have a little bit of an idea of what those options are or what is next for this case?
I think it would be, we don't know. The department said they're going to consider possibilities with waivers. And so this is really open-ended. And I think that it's probably fair to say the outcome will depend on how much attention people really pay to it. And I mean, or the department perhaps will now pursue this solution and, fix it all. But it's very much up in the air. And there's also this lawsuit pending. The judge he threw it out because the state argued that they were immune, and the labor secretary was immune from a lawsuit to address a range of problems with the department, not just the overpayments, but issues with the appeals timing in general, which impacts people who never were able to actually get the money they applied for and are still waiting for a decision or feel like they got the wrong decision, that kind of thing. So the judge threw that out because he said he agreed with the state that they have immunity, and then legal services asked them to reconsider. So he's reconsidering this issue now, but he already was inclined to throw the lawsuit out. So that's pending too. But yeah, it's very unclear like what direction this will go in.
Sarah, I know this is something that you're going to be continuing to follow up on, and also that a lot of people across Alabama are really interested in. So thank you for your reporting on this issue. Thank you for keeping up with it, and you'll have to come back and let us know the next development in this story.
Okay. Thanks, Savannah.
Thanks, Sarah. Everybody watching, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.